Last time, we learned about the different types in Python, variables, and the input command. Today, we're going to learn about what you can do with different values. We're also doing this lesson in the Python interpreter, so if you haven't watched the last video, go ahead and do that now. Let's start with operators. Operators manipulate values. Let's do some math. This is how you add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Use the asterisk for multiplication and a slash for division. Those are pretty standard. Here's three that are a little more unique. This one is how you write an exponent in Python. This means 5 squared. This one is called integer division, or floor division. When you divide something, this will always return the whole number quotient and throw out the remainder if there is one. This last one is called modulo. It's kind of the opposite of floor division. Instead of only returning the quotient, it only returns the remainder. These are all the operations you can do on a string. As you can see, there's a lot, and you can look up what they do if you'd like, but we're only going to talk about a few. You can add strings together to make one bigger string, and you can also multiply strings to repeat something. Subtracting and dividing strings will just give you errors. These are special operations. As you can see, I take a value and then attach a command to the end with a dot. These operations are commands built into the string data type. You can also write them like this, where the string is given to the command. And that might make a little more sense, since we learned that values you give to a command goes inside of the parentheses. We put str before the command because it's the class where the lower command is stored. When we do the operation directly on the value, it's sort of like a short way of writing this. We'll learn more about how this actually works when we get to objects in a later unit. You can see that strip removes extra white space, lower turns everything to lowercase, and upper turns everything to uppercase. The replace command will replace all occurrences of the first parameter with the second parameter. These are more operations you can do with strings. Well, you can actually use these on all sequence data types. A sequence is just a list of items, so a string is actually a list of letters. Every sequence starts from 0 instead of 1. We'll learn more about sequences when we get to lists. Len stands for length. It'll return the length of the string. You use these to chop up a string into pieces. Inside of the brackets, a single number will return that item in the sequence. Two numbers with a colon between them will give you the items in between those indexes. A colon after a number will give you the item and all of the others after it. A colon before gives you the items before it. Don't try to get an item outside of the sequence range, because that will cause an error. Cool, so now let's move on to Booleans. Since Booleans are just a truth statement, we can actually write comparisons and see if they end up true or false. Here are a few examples. Remember, we use one equal sign to define and assign variables. That's why we use two equal signs, to tell Python we're making a comparison. An exclamation before an equal sign checks if the two values are not equal. We can also check if something is greater than or less than. This means greater than or equal to, and this means less than or equal to. We can also check if strings are the same, or if one comes after another in the lexicographic order. That was pretty basic. All Python did was tell us if the comparison was true or false. There are also logical operators in coding. Here's what they look like. The not word negates, or flips the Boolean. True becomes false, and false becomes true. The and tells us if both are true, and the or tells us if one or both is true. A little confusing? Hang in there, things will clear up soon. Okay, so we know Python has a few different types, and they hold different values. In almost all programming languages, types can cause errors if they're used incorrectly, like this. The type command will tell you what type a variable is, and we can use this later on so our programs don't crash. Put the value you want to check inside of the parentheses. You can see here it prints class float, which tells us it's a floating point number. You can also combine the type command with the keyword is, like this. It says true and then false, so it is of type float, but not of type string. So yeah, using types incorrectly can cause errors. But what do you do to fix that? The answer is casting. Casting is changing a value from one type to another. So let's say you have a program, and you want to take a number and then add it to a string to make a bigger string. If we try to run this, it'll error out. It's telling us here that we can't add an integer and a string together. You can only add integers to integers and strings to strings. So we need to change the variable myAge to a string. To cast a value, use the type you want, like a command with parentheses after it. You can turn numbers into strings, strings into numbers. You can also turn things into Booleans and vice versa. Be careful though, because this is an easy way to introduce more errors. Okay, let's go back to that first example. If we cast the integer to a string, it'll run this time without problems. Woo! That was a lot of information. Congrats. But we still don't know how to do very much in Python yet. In the next video, we're going to look at a bunch of examples of programs with what we just learned. Soon enough, we'll be making cool programs that actually do things. So just stick through the first few boring parts, and I promise, coding can get pretty fun. Again, make sure to play around with all of these things on your own. Coming up with cool programs from the beginning is the mark of a skilled programmer. Alright, that's all for this video. See ya, Code Dog out.